Oh, okay. Okay. So I'd like to call to order the Tuesday afternoon, May 24th session of council. Do we have any late items, corporate officer? No late items. So if I could get approval of the agenda. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? That's carried. And adoption of the minutes from May 9th, Committee of the Whole and regular afternoon meeting. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? It's carried. We have no delegations? No. Public comment? Was any pre-registered, corporate officer?
There's no one pre-registered, but I believe we have someone in the gallery.
Yeah, okay, it's Marianne, please. Thank you.
Marianne McDonald, 6505 McDonald Place. This is in regards to 7.8 on your agenda about the anti-racial discrimination. I'll start. It is disappointing that the proposed draft for anti-racial discrimination is nothing more than a cut and paste from the Lidstone document. In fact, it is worse. The guiding principle still refers to visitors of color and Indigenous people and is exclusive to those groups. I believe that Councillor Trainer stated it best when she said that the community should welcome all visitors. This entire document puts a premium on non-judgmentalism and inclusivity while ignoring the fact that we are all different and distinct. The district acknowledges and recognizes the existence in our community of racism in all its forms. How about recognizing the existence of racial diversity in the community instead? I agree that some safeguards can be in place, but to what extent? And at what point do we become too politically correct? And when is it racism versus vandalism? But the most ludicrous statement in this draft, however, refers to environmental racism. Seriously? How far is council prepared to go with this policy? Will just looking at your neighbor the wrong way count as racism? Who's policing this policy? Well, from the roles and responsibilities, it seems it's the CAO and mayor. Is this not encouraging snitching, or better yet, from my perspective, it suggests that if someone is unhappy with what is said, rather than trying to work it out, they are encouraged to report it. What has happened to our conscience and deep sense of what is right and wrong? The suggestion that staff should require a course, which would be required on a yearly basis, is questionable, as is the signing of a document. In my opinion, it is the overreaching in the regulations. I feel the anti-racism document needs more work and needs to be more tailored to suit this entire community. There is no document that is a one-size-fits-all. If we use this draft as it stands, then I have to question what kind of future is it creating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to business items, and I should say Mayor Boot is in transit and she's joining us online, so she is here at the meeting. So item 7.1, the waterfront concept plan update. I'll turn this over to our Director of Community Services. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Council. The Waterfront Concept Plan consultants from Lees & Associates and I are back again to provide Council another update and to receive Council's feedback prior to initiating the next round of community engagement. The subject properties for the Waterfront Concept Plan include Gordon Beggs, Rotary Beach, Peach Orchard Beach, and 16997 Lakeshore Drive, locally known as Horse Beach. The consultants will present highlights from the key findings from the first round of engagement, the top improvements that the community identified, draft vision, goals, objectives, and actions for the plan, draft concept drawings, an overview of the proposed second round of community engagement activities, and an update on the project timelines. The consultants have prepared 23 slides, which is expected to take about 20 minutes to go through, and then they will open it up to Council for questions and comments. And with that, I will turn it over to Megan Turnock and her team via Zoom.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Great. happy to be back in front of you and to show you our progress on this waterfront concept master plan. I will just share my screen with the slides here. As Lori mentioned, we have a agenda, some slides to take you through, which will take about 20 minutes, and then we'll have some opportunities for feedback and questions. So there's a lot to talk about. 20 minutes, I'll be able to hit the highlights, but I'm sure there'll be some gaps potentially that you want to ask questions about at the end. So if I miss anything as we go through, look forward to discussions at the end. We are at the draft concept plan phase. This is where we are we have collected our research and background. We've done a first round of community engagement with stakeholder meetings and an online public survey. We've collected all of this and done some compilation of the key findings there in terms of what that means for the parks themselves. We are looking at physical improvements, but also some management elements as well, just as a reminder of the scope. And just high level, we are looking at a long-term vision. It does include park management and protection of habitat, as well as the park amenities. And ultimately, the final plan will have an implementation plan. So some things might be short-term initiatives, whereas others are going to have a much longer timeline for implementation. The first round of engagement was recently completed, and we have met with you. We met with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We had some sessions with stakeholders in small groups and a larger online workshop format with stakeholders. We also had an online survey to help us better understand how people use the waterfront and what their priorities are. And quite a good response from the public online survey of 480 responses. And we're looking forward to coming back to the public as well in the next month or so. There were 17 stakeholder groups, including some specific outreach to environmental organizations, school groups, and a variety of other recreational users. Overall, we heard some common themes from the stakeholders and the public that we applied to the entire waterfront. So this slide just kind of captures an overview of what I'll get to in more detail on upcoming slides. We heard early on parking is a challenge, and things like bike racks and improved connections are needed. Accessibility came up a lot in terms of getting to the water, being able to make use of the picnic tables and the washrooms and making it inclusive for everybody. There was a lot of interest in more trees and shade, and environmental improvements, improved trails and connections, and enhancements to the environmental features. In terms of water recreation, improving safety and reducing conflicts between swimmers and boaters was top of mind. And from an environmental standpoint, the importance of the lake and the shoreline ecosystems was highlighted. And there was support for more canopy trees and native plantings in particular. The opportunities for horses and dogs and their owners to enjoy the waterfront was also a key topic that we'll get into in more detail in upcoming slides. So just to dive into the access issues, we all know that parking is a challenge, and we wanted to figure out, what's the right move? Are we going to be adding parking? Is it just a matter of reorganizing? And through the online survey, we got pretty definitive answer that keeping the usable park space is more important to the community than adding parking. So I was actually really pleased to have such a clear message from the community on that. It gave us a good direction, I think. Adding bike racks and improving the cycling lane to the waterfront may help encourage more people to bike instead of drive, especially as e-bikes become more popular. We did hear from youth as well that they're often either dropped off by car at the waterfront, or they do bike and would like to have places to lock bikes. We did tie in also to the trails plan, which has an improved connection to the waterfront from town. Washrooms, so there is As you know, there's funding to do washroom upgrades, and we did hear that there's strong support for washroom upgrades, with the top 3 priorities being improved accessibility, improving at least one for year-round use, and adding family wash and change rooms, or those single stall larger change rooms, which may be able to be added to the outside of one or both of the washrooms. Through the survey, we also wanted to explore the character of each park so we could build on sort of the top uses and make sure that there be a diversity of different types of opportunities across the waterfront, and they aren't all just the same park for everyone. So at Rotary Beach, as you know, it's very water and beach focused. It's also a place people bring visitors a lot. Stakeholders also echo the importance of the beach and the pier. And I'll talk specifically about the pier when we get to the concept design, but Peach Orchard sees a lot of use from people, particularly on the Centennial Trail. So it's a lot of people walk through that park, but it's more of a picnic spot. And then there's very high use of the dog beach, and obviously the playground and spray park are an attraction. Horse Beach is a quieter spot. There's very high use of the dog, it's a quieter spot for relaxing and swimming. This location also kind of stood out as a launching point for canoes, kayaks, and paddle boards. And interestingly, people also come here for solitude. So there's diversity among these 3 parks, and we tried to celebrate that through our design. When looking forward to some of the improvements, we heard that people want more shelter from the sun and more trees and habitat areas at both Rotary Beach and Peach Orchard specifically. Other top amenities for Rotary Beach were fire pits, food trucks, and a larger swimming area. For Peach Orchard, there's a desire for an improved beach and also food trucks and improved accessibility at the dog beach. It's pretty clear that people want to keep Horse Beach as a mellow, part of a local spot with access for horses in particular. So with all of these sort of high-level findings in mind, we have written a draft vision statement, inspired partly by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and making sure it aligns with that. But also incorporating some of the elements from the engagement input. So as it stands, the draft says, Summerland's waterfront engages residents and visitors with a unique natural setting, small town culture and character, and supports health and wellness for all, and reflects the importance of the lakeshore areas to the community. We also have 3 overarching goals that we thought capture the spirit of the community values as well as the practical needs of this project. And these could be goals that you come back to later if other new opportunities come up, or things that aren't covered in this master plan, in this concept plan arise. You can come back to these goals as well as to guide decisions. So overall, we want to foster engaging experiences for all, make sure there's a diversity of opportunities. We have things for all ages, encourage active living, and just that these parks are inclusive and accessible. We want to improve access, safety, and resilience. So upgrading the waterfront while maintaining that existing character of these well-loved beaches and parks. And finally, protect the environment. So protecting and enhancing the native riparian ecosystems to help the waterfront adapt to climate change. A significant amount of the shoreline of Okanagan Lake has been impacted by docks and shoreline protection, fill, and other disturbances to the aquatic environment as well. So these public spaces are one of the key opportunities for the district to demonstrate good stewardship of the lake. As we developed recommendations, we also found that there were some key themes, so we captured those in a set of objectives. We intended to improve connections to the waterfront, improve universal accessibility, improve and upgrade existing amenities. There was a lot of support for sort of enhancing what was already there rather than necessarily a whole-scale redesign or renovation of the whole parks. So we took a softer touch. Improving the safety of water recreation users was a key objective, protecting and enhancing the waterfront environment, and directing and managing animal use of the waterfront as well. So finding that right balance between the different uses, the push and pull of the human uses versus the ecological, as well as dogs and people and horses in these three spaces. So first I'll talk about sort of the key actions for the waterfront overall. These include improving cycling facilities, improving accessible parking specifically, bringing in some life-saving equipment, incorporating more natural riparian plantings and more trees wherever we can, and taking a sort of a holistic approach to animal management. So part of this project is to advise on how these parks can be more resilient in the face of flooding, how to deal with erosion issues. We did meet with some environmental stakeholders and have had a look in particular at the Love Your Lakes reports. And I always reference the Green Shores guidelines as well for sustainable shoreline management and using natural systems. Public waterfronts in many communities are in the position where you have to lead the way in order to demonstrate better ways of protecting shorelines. Okanagan Lake, like I mentioned, has been highly impacted. Marinas and docks, and even when you look at Rotary Beach, people love the beach, but that is actually a beach nourishment project. That's not a natural beach, and it's being held there by breakwater. And most of the strategies for shoreline protection so far is focused on simply adding riprap. So in order to support initiatives like restoration of the kokanee and mussel habitat in the lake, the more balance we can bring to these parks in terms of adding riparian plantings, incorporating more diversity into the riprap areas, we'll just have some longer term benefits to the lake that this is so important to the community. So probably the biggest move we've made in this whole waterfront is to combine the breakwater and the pier at Rotary Beach. We are bringing this forward because it achieves a couple of key things. The shoreline has been highly impacted by the pier. There's the breakwater, there's F&I docks, there's riprap, and then also the beach sand that has been brought in. And as it stands, there's very little opportunity to improve the ecological values and improve the resilience of the shoreline. The pier is in disrepair, as we know, and needs replacement. The breakwater is also regularly in need of maintenance, but it must stay where it is in order to retain the beach sand. So the idea is by combining these features, the district will only have one structure to maintain. There's better definition of the swimming area, and there is an opportunity for a significant length of shoreline and aquatic habitat that could be enhanced on the north side of the pier breakwater combination. There were slightly more people who wanted the pier rebuilt in the same way, but then there were also many people, almost over half of people, who wanted to see additional play features, fishing accommodation. So the suggestion is to rebuild with a similar character, so primarily using that wood surfacing, but accommodating new uses such as a rope swing or a diving deck, as well as potentially a ramp down to a floating play feature. Could also be popular as a seasonal attraction. Detailed design, again, would have to have options for things like low-level lighting and seating features, but these were all ways to enhance the use of the pier. The design would also need to provide access for repairs of the breakwater. An example of an option might be metal grating that could be opened in sections. And there would also need to be analysis to ensure the pier isn't impacted by waves or flooding from underneath. So these are some feasibility considerations. But I have tested this idea with part of our team, Northwest Hydraulic Consultants, and they said with some caveats that this could be achieved. There is always the option of sticking with the existing pier location, but we thought it was worth testing with council stakeholders in the community because of the potential benefits. Other design elements are improved marking for the parking lot, additional accessible parking stalls that are conveniently located, bringing in an accessible beach mat to the water, perhaps seasonally, adding additional plantings and trees along the south and west edges of the park as well. There's a green corridor planting there in the southwest corner. Many more features on this park, but I'm just going to keep us from going down into too much of the detail. Just to bring it back to what we heard from the public about the pier. People love it to relax. They like to dive and jump into the water, especially youth. It's a place to take photos, a place to socialize. As I said, 63% of people wanted us to rebuild the pier as close to the same as possible. I think some of that, part of that is that character element that we're not going to be proposing something super modern and flashy, that it needs to be sort of the character of Summerland as well. But then there were lots of people, 55%, who said, adding new play features, a rope swing, a slide, platforms for diving. So there's, and this pier is very important for youth as well. Was brought up regularly by the school groups and in a stakeholder workshop. So just shifting up to Peach Orchard Park now. Peach Orchard Park really provides we've written the vision statements for each of these parks as well. So this is more of a multifunctional waterfront experience to have fun and gather with friends and family, as well as to get out on the water. Just referencing the location of the boat launch here. So one of the main constraining factors of this park is the Centennial Trail. This has somewhat limited what we can do in terms of enhancing the beach and also adding ecological value here. In its current location, it just really constrains that edge of the park. So, as Rotary Beach is the result of sand that was actually brought in, and then the breakwater keeps that sand and the beach for the most part intact. There's no breakwater here, and adding a breakwater would also negatively impact the riparian and aquatic habitat, which you'd have to probably have a breakwater in order to have a successful and enhanced beach here. It also, those breakwaters limit the movement of sediment and nutrients in the lake. And in the long term, if we are looking at a long-term plan, the idea of pulling that trail back away from the shoreline to get a bigger, wider edge for restoration should be looked at. But for this 10 to 15 year view forward, we just thought it was probably a little too ambitious. So rather than that, we did get some added riparian and shade planting adjacent to the boat launch, as well as enhancing the tree canopy throughout the park, particularly through the grass area. The playground is in need of replacement, along with a better approach to seating. Some of the seating, just because of the way it's been arranged, is quite exposed and not necessarily accessible. The concrete pads, often the edge coming up to those concrete pads is not accessible. There are gaps. So those need to be replaced, as well as just some enhanced areas for seating and picnicking and vegetation along these very active areas to the south. It was requested that the volleyball court get better sand and a better definition around the edge. So that's a sort of a quick win that could be achieved in relatively short order. We did tackle or have some conversations about the parking passes, pay for parking options. The challenge there that was finally settled on is just really that doing anything in one location will simply move the problem to other locations in the community or other communities. We'd already been flagged that the Trout Creek boat launch is also getting overflow from this boat launch. So rather than instituting a parking pass system or a pay for parking, at this point, we suggest that you start to track the boat launch use, potentially with traffic counters and improve signage, and then initiate sort of a combined effort, I would say, with adjacent land managers, adjacent jurisdictions, to see if there's some more collaborative and holistic approach to managing these boat launches that might be possible. Since this park is not as well used in the winter as well, it's a good opportunity to allow off-season use of the grass field by dogs and their owners. And we are suggesting a seasonal fenced area to prevent dogs from running across the Centennial Trail or accessing the beach and water outside the designated dog beach. Just to go back to some of what we heard about the boat launch. The boat launch is very busy in the summer, but it's not necessarily heavily used year round. There were questions and requests about improving the boat and trailer parking, but really from our site analysis, I would say the organization of the boat launch is quite good. And the only way you could really improve access would be to potentially add another row of trailer parking. And we really heard so strongly from the community that they want to prioritize keeping that park space over adding parking. We didn't move forward with that as an option. We did consider whether any parking could be added along the driveway in the parcel to the north, but the few spots you could get just didn't justify the cost of, say, structural retention of the road. There's also concern of potential impacts to drainage in the property to the north, as well as some lack of clarity on ownership, which is still being determined. In terms of the dog beach, there were a lot of people who use the dog beach and who noted that they have seen it being well used as well. There have been some recent improvements to the gate and entrances, but people would also like to see access to the beach and water. So perhaps another beach mat at this location is warranted. And there could also be some more seating options for those who aren't able to stand for long periods of time. Finally, for Horse Beach, the vision we drafted is Horse Beach is a small beach nook tucked along the waterfront for quiet, casual access for locals. People were quite passionate about keeping Horse Beach as a quiet space and to ensure that it's not promoted like the other beaches. It was noted that there may be native mussel habitat in the water near the shoreline, and we've also noted that because of the bluffs across the road, this park is in a sort of a designated landslide hazard area. And this further supports that this beach should really not be promoted or designed to draw people there as a destination. And there does need to be some clear signage about the landslide hazard there. So what to do? Like, how do you balance, the high demand for access to the lake with the current conditions at this park? Well, there were a few people, not a lot, but a few people who bring their horses to cool off in the summer. And people also bring their dogs, noting that there's crowding at the dog beach at Peach Orchard in the summer. We were asked to make recommendations on animal access at this park. And given the low number of horses, maybe 10, our sense is that there's maybe 10 per week that may come in the summer only. We are recommending it for the time being, the continuing to allow them access as it's the only appropriate location. The feedback was sort of split on whether off-leash dogs should be allowed at Horse Beach. There was good support for dogs on leash. But then we need to bring up the downside of this is the potential for this to become more of a destination, if that is the way that the council wants to go and that eventually we go. With more of a destination as a place where you can bring dogs even on leash, there's potential to have an increasing impact to the aquatic habitat and wildlife, and it may lose its sort of quiet, casual use character. And also, if this park becomes this location for dogs on leash, there's also potential for demand for amenities such as garbage cans and washrooms and more park furnishings, which I think is not on the table for this at this point. It also would bring more people to the landslide hazard zone. So we're really trying to be cautious about what we put in this park. Even though there is a lot of demand, there is also already the dog beach and the seasonal off-leash area at Peach Orchard Park, as well as on-leash access at Sunoka Provincial Park. So for these reasons, our first suggestion is just to apply the district's bylaw and do not allow dogs at this beach. We know the dog owners are not going to be happy about this. We've outlined some of the reasons why we are suggesting this. Will there continue to be use of this beach by people and their dogs? Yes, that is likely. Does that mean the district should explicitly allow it? No, I don't think so. It's simply will give the district the ability to enforce that bylaw if needed, and also to prevent this park from becoming that destination where you really don't want to be attracting large numbers of people to this beach, given its the sensitive location in the landslide zone. It was pretty strong support for horses being permitted. You could say, what's the difference? Well, there are so many more dogs in the community than horses in terms of numbers using the beaches. So that's the difference between those two, managing those two types of animals. On that note, we are going back to the public to get feedback on the draft concepts in June. That's just a few weeks from now. We will have an online survey as well as an in-person open house. We'll be taking the feedback from the community and we'll be finalizing the concept plan by the end of August. So we still have quite a lot of work to do. Wanted to get this draft in front of everyone so we can test some of our ideas, get feedback, and in the next phase, we'll also just be refining some of the feasibility and costing for some of these elements to identify what's the highest priority and what might be longer term. With that, I'll turn it back to council. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Megan. So we'll open it up for questions. Mayor Boot, if you have any questions, just feel free to jump in because I can't really tell if you're raising your hand or not. Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boat launch, the property to the north of the boat launch, that's green. We've had these conversations before. Now there's conversation about, we don't know who the ownership is of this area. That's what our consultant just said. And also it would be a quick win for parking if we just, because it's being utilized for parking as we speak. So in the summertime, there's people just jump the curb and park there regardless with their boat trucks and trailers. If we officially had it, would probably take a lot of the congestion off of the roads where people park now. I just don't understand the part that who owns it. Could somebody clarify that, please? Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Van Alphen. So it is provincial land, and we are in the process of renewing our license of occupation. So our corporate officer is trying to get that confirmation. In the past, if you look at the border on our GIS mapping, it just kind of goes to the edge of the boat launch. And so that piece of land is in question right now. So we are seeking out clarity with our renewal to include that for our access. My understanding in the past that we have many years ago reached out for parking there and the province turned it down. But that might have been a hard surface parking area. So we're going to look to see if there could be some flexibility around that for our use in the future.
Councillor Barkwell and Councillor Trainer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to emphasize what Councillor Van Alphen said about parking. We can't, I mean, I know that 80% of the people didn't want to give up any park area for parking, but people want to have their cake and eat it too, sometimes on these questions. And that area isn't used for anything really but parking now, and we can't take that away. So one way or the other, maybe it becomes less formal and an overflow parking or something, as it sort of happens now. I think it could be improved a little bit, but there's just no way we just don't have adequate parking down there, and there's got to be a bit of a compromise there. And that spot to the north is available; it's not used. So that's the direction I think we should be going on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Trainer.
I just have a couple comments about the presentation. Thanks for bringing it today. I thought it was really good. My first comment is that I'm really happy to hear that people don't want to take more park space away for parking. I think you did get a clear answer on that. And I also am happy to see that people are asking for more shade all along the waterfront with trees or, whatever else we can get in there. And I think with climate change, that's going to be really important. The more trees we can plant and give people places to cool off. So I think that that's a really important thing that we can do is plant more trees. The horse beach, that's a tough one. I think I'll wait to see more about what happens as we move along with more public engagement on that one. And then I agree to, I think, Megan, you said your suggestion was to hold off on charging payment for the boat launch at this point. I think
Yeah.
that is a good suggestion, just given that I think that might drive people over to the Trout Creek one, which is already used and can't handle any more than it's already getting because there's no parking there except for on, people's lawns. And then finally, just under, this is just a little tiny thing, but under goals, I think it was. I can't remember. Goals. Foster engaging experiences for everyone. I just thought another way to word that, I'm just throwing it out there, is create memorable experiences for everyone, because a lot of people come up to Summerland to vacation and they go to Rotary Beach and they have memories. And I'm sure Councillor Barkwell remembers swimming there. Like, it's just kind of a beach that people go to and they have a lot of fond memories. So I think that that's something that we want to create for the people that live here now and also for tourists that come up. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're planning that. And on that note, the bathrooms definitely need to be upgraded there. At Peach Orchard, they need to be upgraded as well. I was there on the weekend for the Giant's Head Grind, and one of the doors doesn't shut to the washroom. So we had to take turns holding it closed so people could use the washroom. So anyway, really good report. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I have a question about the opportunity to put the pier over top of the breakwater. I'm just wondering, how high would that be? Would it be higher than the current pier? And would it have to be wider based on what the current breakwater looks like?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Carlson. The detailed design of the pier we haven't gone into that level of detail yet, but that will be something we are testing in the next little while before we finalize the decision on that. It certainly could need to be wider, and the height, I'm not sure, actually. Sorry, I can't answer that question at the moment.
Just to follow up on that, though, will there be an opportunity to be able to compare costs of, say, just rebuilding the existing pier versus building a new pier over top of the breakwater, just so we have an idea of what the cost difference would be?
Yes, certainly. And considering getting more information about how much repair is needed on the breakwater as well, something to consider how those might work together.
Okay, anyone else? I have a couple of questions, if I may. One in respect to cycling infrastructure. My kids basically spent their whole summers down at Rotary Beach growing up, like many kids in Summerland did. And whenever they were heading down to the beach, and if I was heading down to the tennis course to play tennis, they would make sure that I drove the pickup truck down to the courts so that they could cycle down to the beach and throw their bike into the back of the truck so they wouldn't have to cycle back uphill. And inevitably, when I was heading back up the hill, not just my kids' bikes were in the back of the truck, but every kid in the neighborhood's bikes were in the back of my truck. So, that, I think the biggest one of the biggest problems with for children, anyways, for cycling and building in is just that it's a really steep hill going down there, no matter which hill you go down. And so I'm just wondering, when we're thinking about putting in biking infrastructure, if something like that is taken into account.
Thanks for your question. Yes, I think, for the most part, the infrastructure we're proposing is basic, like making sure that there are bike racks and safe places to lock up bikes. That trails master plan did have a improved connection for cyclists and pedestrians up to town along Lakeshore Drive. So we're building off of that. But I think the extent of that would be an improved shoulder condition.
Okay, thank you. And I also like to ask a question about Peach Orchard Beach Park. Sometime back when we were looking at different locations for off-leash dog parks, that was one park that was considered as a possible location for an off-leash dog park. And as you probably know, we've set up a temporary dog park that we're monitoring in another part of town. Conceivably, we might want to try to set up other temporary parks elsewhere to see how they work. And so would there still be an opportunity, looking at the plans, to be able to put a pop-up dog park or temporary dog park there just to see how it works?
Yes, I think that would be a fantastic way to test it out. Some temporary fencing and in the grassy area at Peach Orchard makes a lot of sense, especially in the winter.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At first I thought, oh, that's a really great idea, putting the pier on the breakwater. But when I look at it now, I'm not so keen about the idea, because it kind of takes away usable space. The pier now heads off to the straight east, but it spreads out the users on the beach, and it kind of turns it into a unused area. So it'll depend on costs and stuff like that, but I'm not sure I'm as enamored with that idea as I was at the very first. Perhaps you could throw that slide back up on the screen for a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, so all of that sort of to the north area wouldn't really be very well used. Where you're drawing your cursor right now is kind of where the existing pier is, and people are out there, they're spread out, and that beach has a lot of people at it and will only have more. So I for that reason, it'd be nice to be able to, if possible, keep the pier in that area. The other thing you sort of mentioned about erosion on Peach Orchard Beach and breakwater. I didn't quite catch the beginning, but I can see that continued erosion would be a problem, because that beach, as you probably know, was made by dredging up the material that was in front of it and placing it there. And so it probably wants, by nature, to sort of go back to its original condition 40 years ago or 50 years ago. And a breakwater would perhaps serve the purpose it does down at Rotary Beach. I mean, that beach wasn't built until the highway was widened in the late 90s. It was just industrial waterfront and they took away Rotary Beach, which was at the intersection with the highway hill, in order to widen the road and everything, and the highways department built that beach. And I guess that's why it needs that breakwater. And perhaps a small breakwater for Peach Orchard Beach would also be good to preserve it for the long run. And I think maybe a little bit of information from the people that know about that might be a good idea, because eventually we could lose that beach as it erodes right up to the riprap on the walkway. And I do support no dogs at Horse Beach. I think if you want to have your dog on the beach, you can go down to Sunoka. That's still part of our community. And although they're not there that often at all, it's nice to be able to have that place and preserve it as a unique opportunity in Summerland. And horses and dogs don't often, sometimes, occasionally don't mix well. It's another reason.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Could I just address the comments? Yeah, I wasn't actually suggesting that you add a breakwater here. It was more that the opportunity here, there is riprap adjacent to the boat launch, and that acts as a bit of protection if you could pull the beach back actually into the grassy area. You could create a beach, expanded beach, but the Centennial Trail has been built so close that for now, I think that trail is going to stay where it is. I think the impact of adding a breakwater here would have a negative impact on the ecological values. So we're kind of in a balancing act there. Thank you.
Do we know that for sure that it would impact I mean, it's a sandy beach now. People, I don't know for sure. I don't even know if it would preserve it. But the reason the breakwater or the walkway is so close to the beach now is because it didn't used to be, and that's being eroded. And it could be a small stitch in time saves nine here on preserving the beach. I just would like to know what the impact is and where one would, if something could be done to slow the erosion there and what the impacts of it would be. And right now we don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. We will, some of the next phase of this project is looking at feasibility for flood mitigation and the erosion issues with Northwest Hydraulic Consultants who are on our team. So we can give you some more information about those options. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we look forward to the next phase. And if somebody could bring this forward for information. Councillor Van Elfen, second by Councillor Barkwell. All in favor? That's carried. And the next item, 7.2, Giants Head Mountain Trails Project Update. I'll turn this over to our CAO. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. With our funding confirmed for phases 3 and 4 of the trail project, we want to come back to council to outline next steps and activities on the project. The overarching plan is, of course, the 2018 Giants Head Mountain Trail Redevelopment Plan. We are excited about moving forward with the project and are certainly open to guidance from council as we take the next steps to the overall estimated completion of the project in 2025. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Director of Community Services.
Thank you, CAO Stott. As mentioned, the purpose of this report is to provide council with an update on the Trails project and an overview of the works that were completed as phases 1 and 2 and the scope of work for phases 3 and 4. The Government of Canada announced the results of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program funded projects on April 12th, 2022. That was 2 years after we applied for the grant, but we were thrilled to be a successful project. We were one of 57 projects supported across British Columbia. The District of Summerland will receive $673,113 from the federal government and $560,871 from the provincial government through this ICIP program. The district's share of $448,798 is funded through the Community Works Gas Tax Reserve. So the total approved project budget is just under $1.7 million. After consultation in the community, which started in 2016, a trails redevelopment plan for Giants Head Mountain was finalized in 2018, and this plan has been used to provide guidance and direction on the various phases of the project. Phases 1 and 2 were completed in 2020 with financial support from a provincial rural dividend grant, federal gas tax funding, and donations from the Rotary Club of Summerland. Those works included an environmental management plan, upgrading 5.4 kilometers of trails, building 2.3 kilometers of new trails, trail decommissioning for environmental protection and erosion control, new safety guardrails, park entrance improvements, road pullouts, refurbishing the viewing tubes, and wayfinding signage. The project scope of work for phases 3 and 4, which was reviewed and approved by Council on September 28, 2020, includes upper circulation road paving and connecting pedestrian trails, upgrade of existing parking lot washroom, upper parking area upgrades and furnishings, park entrance washroom and servicing in the lower parking lot, the grind route from the upper parking lot to the top of the mountain, and that would be design work and construction, which due to financial restrictions was cut from phases 1 and 2 and now is in this scope of work. And we also identified new items, which was included and approved through the grant application. So that is some enhanced work on creating some crib steps on the steep sections of the grind trail. We found that there was some erosion happening on those steep sections, and so this is to correct some of that. To provide more split rail fencing and other recommended measures to keep people on dedicated trails. So we found that some people were still cutting and still going on trails we didn't want them to go on, so funding is available for additional split rail fencing. We've got remedial planting and invasive weed management. We found that the first phases did create some issues with invasive weeds, so we now have funding to create a plan and some actions around that. Indigenous engagement and interpretive signage, brush removal and fire hazard remediation work, wayfinding improvements for bikes. We found that some of the bikes were a little challenged on where they could go and where they shouldn't be going, so some improved signage around that. Park road improvements, so there are some issues on the road going up where there's some erosion, and so looking at some funding to do some road improvements are included. And then also all the consulting fees for design work, tender document preparation, and construction management is included in that $1.7 million. Once the District of Summerland has completed the requirements around the grant, requirements of First Nations consultation, staff will be proceeding with some of the initial works later this year, which includes wildfire assessment, snake hibernaculum assessment, and invasive species management plan. Detailed design work and tender documents will be completed in 2023, with construction to follow. The project completion deadline is December 31st, 2026. However, it is anticipated that the full project will be completed in 2025. So with that concludes my project update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Traynor.
Thank you for that update, Lori. Was there, I'm just reading this again, is there any money available to work on the current trails? Like, for example, the grind trail. I think it looked good on paper, but right now when you start to head up the road and then you take off up, and it's just like the whole, it's a very, very wide section right now where people are just going wherever they want, and it's created a lot of erosion. So I think, I know there's money in here for signs, but I really think that needs to be emphasized on the entire mountain. Like, I think the consultants or whoever's going to do this work needs to hike the current trails and make sure that they are properly signed and roped off where people shouldn't go, because that's what I'm hearing the most complaints from people, is that all the new trails that have been built, people are just going everywhere. And so they've actually created more damage than what was there before. So I think that can be fixed with proper signage. And I think I mentioned this about a month ago as well, where work was done to try to decommission old trails by just putting like branches and stuff over. I don't think that worked. So again, more signage there. And then In terms of the road pullouts, like when you're driving up the road, there's pullouts right now for all of the vehicles to pull over because the road is so narrow. From what I've seen so far, those pullouts haven't been maintained. So there's a lot of grass and like pine needles and stuff. And so, you know, during the peak summer months, during fire season, if we have vehicles pulling with hot engines, pulling over into those pullouts and they're not cleared, you know, there's a potential in my mind for fire risk if, you know, so I think that that needs to be addressed in the new work. And then the only other thing that I was asked to from some people that use the trails is the mountain biking trail up. It's called the East Ridge Trail. It's very, I've said this again before, but it's very, very difficult to ride. And so I don't know if there's any leftover money or anything that we can do to round out some of those corners to make that trail more usable for more mountain bikers. Because right now, like you have to be like a pro, an Olympic pro to ride that trail. So, and you know, that trail carved a pretty harsh carve out on the mountain, like you can see it. And so I think that we need to, if we built that trail, we need to make sure that people are using it for what it was intended for. And right now it's not super usable. So I think if there's any money to fix that trail, that would be good. And those are my notes. Thanks.
Got all that?
Thank you, through the chair. May I respond just for thank you for the comments, Councillor Trainer. So to answer your first three, so steeper sections of the grind trail is in there and better erosion control. So yes, it's in there in the current scope. Additional signage absolutely is in there. Split rail fencing is in there, and that's to help decommission trails. So those three things, absolutely. Pull-out maintenance, that's on our staff, that's operational, so we can flag that and make sure that we're checking that for fire hazard. So that wouldn't necessarily be part of this project, but just of our regular operational maintenance. As far as the mountain bike trail, the East Ridge Trail, yes, it is an advanced trail. It was very clearly identified as an advanced trail. But as you know, even advanced riders are, you know, there's a few I know that can go up, but it's a tough trail. We do not have funding in the existing scope of work for that trail, but we can see where we're at once we get pricing in, and you know, if there's money left over, then maybe we could look at an additional pot of money to be able to look at upgrades to that trail.
Sure, go ahead.
And just one more quick comment. Do we have a project manager for these next two phases, or is that all on your table? Or do we have somebody dedicated that can kind of watch the work as it's being done, I guess? Just to make sure that that the work that's being done is what we've agreed on.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. We will have staff dedicated to watch the project, likely a technician through Public Works as well as myself, but we also have funding through the project for construction management. So there would be a dedicated person that is weekly checking on the work to make sure that it's following the design that still is to be created. So the design work, we still need to do that in 2023, and then the actual construction comes the year after. So there is that follow-up person that will, after design, monitoring the construction with staff.
Okay, thank you. Just will also comment on the East Trail. I've heard lots of comments, not only from bikers, but also hikers, where it's not, when I think back of why, you know, when we first, we wanted to make that trail accessible to hikers because so people could get those beautiful views of the lake. And so we kind of made it this trail for both bikers and hikers. And it seems it doesn't really work for either group. That's certainly what I've heard. So maybe it's a separate project altogether at some point in the future, but I think eventually we're going to need to address that trail. And if it's not working for anybody, then what's the purpose of it? I just have a question about decommissioning trails. Is blocking the path and letting nature take its course kind of the only way you can decommission a trail? Is there other ways you can, that anything else you can do to the trails themselves to expedite the process?
Definitely split rail fencing is probably the best way, as long as it's wide enough that people aren't going around the split rail fencing. Signage helps a bit, but some people ignore the signs. Their recommended method was to use nature and brush over it and hope that with time the growth would come in. But some of the areas are just really popular and people are going through, and that trail is being maintained by the feet that are on it. It's something we can explore with the trail consultants to see if they have some other methods of decommissioning trails or trying to rub it out a bit, put some fill on the trail. But I know it is a challenge, and one of the biggest challenges is the grind route going up from the upper parking lot to the top. And by creating a dedicated route there, instead of just the friendly giant route, hopefully will create a route where people will stay on that trail, the grind trail, and not do all the braiding that they're doing right now. So we're hoping that will help.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you. I can't say that I know intimately every trail on the mountain, but I'm sort of wondering, are there some trails that people just are ignoring the brush? I remember seeing the brush and stuff that there's so much pressure to use. We may as well give in and say, okay, this is the trail here, and decommission something else that's less popular. Perhaps there's some tidal waves that are too big to stop.
And through the chair, that's definitely with the grind upper trail. People are just doing it and doing it and doing it. So that was always in the plan. We just didn't have the funding to do it. So I think that will be a big help. Perhaps there might be a few cuts where we have to look. I know winter tracking, when people are doing different routes in the winter because it's easier in the snow. The grind trail can be really slippery and steep, and so there's other routes being created. So that's something we can explore with our trail consultants to see if they're seeing some of the trails that we might want to encourage people and other ones we want to really focus on no-go zones.
I just wanted to also note that what we're talking about here today on doing improvements to meet today's needs are parks that were both established in 1967, 55 years ago. And I wonder what we're doing today that will be, of use 55 years from now.
We'll have to have a designated cow path. I think that's off-leash dog park. Okay, a cow park. Mayor Boot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of comments. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. I just have a couple of comments on some of the comments that have already been made, beginning with the East Ridge Trail. I recognize that may be difficult for people that are using it for biking, certainly much more challenging than I would ever attempt. But I'm one of those people that like to walk along that as well. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that is supposed to be a multi-use trail and that we need to follow our trail etiquette if we happen to run into somebody that is using that as a mountain biker. So that's one point. Secondly, I have some concern about the decommissioning piece of it. And I think that the whole idea of decommissioning certain trails or certain parts of trails was to reduce the environmental impact on the mountain. And that includes the environmental impact of loss of vegetation and the erosion. So I would be really reticent to just, just say, okay, there are a lot of people using this trail, so we'll decommission what we commissioned last time and just go back to that. I would be really uncomfortable with doing that. I think that, as I said, the one of the reasons for redeveloping the redevelopment of these trails was to reduce the environmental impacts on the mountain and to regenerate the grasslands ecosystem that supports a number of species at risk in the South Okanagan. So that's all I wanted to say about this. And I'm really looking forward to this project getting underway. I realize it is another significant project for the Director of Community Services and the staff there, but I know that it's in good hands. So thank you for allowing me to have those comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Trainer.
Yeah, I just have one final comment. I think a lot of the improvements that we've made so far are really good. Like the top of the mountain has really good fencing now. There is really good signs. The parking lot at the bottom is a lot better. It's a lot easier to use. So I think that we have definitely done some good things that I'm really proud of. I'm wondering for phase 3 and 4, can we get this information onto our website just so we can, if I get asked exactly what we're doing in phase 3 and 4, that I can send people there. And then at the beginning of this report, you mentioned the breakdown of cost as well. So if we could just get that on there as well, like the federal government, province, and then our portion through gas tax, we could just get that information. That would be really helpful. And then I can direct people there if they have questions. Thanks.
It's okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much. No one else? If someone could bring this forward for information. Councillor Trainer, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? That's carried. Now we have item 7.3, UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund Grant Application, and again, the Director of Community Services.
Thank you very much. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider supporting the submission of a grant application to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Strategic Priorities Fund, delivered through the Canada Community Building Fund in British Columbia, to obtain $6 million of funding towards the Summerland Recreation Centre project and provide overall grant management for the project. The Strategic Priorities Fund is one of 3 funding streams delivered through the Canada Community Building Fund in British Columbia, formerly known as the Gas Tax Fund. The Strategic Priorities Fund is an application-based funding program which pools a portion of the annual fund for strategic investments that are considered large in scale, regional in impact, or innovative, and support the fund's national objectives of productivity and economic growth, a clean environment, and strong cities and communities. The third intake of the program will see an investment of up to $100 million to support infrastructure and capacity building projects in communities across the province. The funding intakes in 2015 and 2017 resulted in the approval of 170 projects totaling over $291 million in Canada Community Building funding. The program identifies recreation and sport infrastructure as eligible capital projects. Available funding is up to 100% of net eligible costs or approved projects up to a maximum of federal contribution of $6 million. The application deadline is June 30th, 2022. No timeframe has been identified for when the application results will be announced, but based on previous intakes, it was about 6 to 8 months. So the staff recommendation is that Council support this application for the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund to obtain $6 million towards the Summerland Recreation Centre project, and to confirm that the District of Summerland will provide overall grant management of the project. A Council resolution is required to be included in the grant application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through to our CAO, and this question is going to get asked, so I might as well ask for clarity today. if we're applying for this funding, which I think is a great opportunity, people are going to ask, why aren't we applying for this money for road infrastructure repair? Could you please give us an answer? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. It's a fair question, and I think oftentimes the public can be confused how these programs work, especially from senior levels of government. This is a program that is, it's a dedicated funding stream specifically for recreational infrastructure. So they'll only entertain applications that fit within those parameters. We absolutely do go for other funds as well, where those come up to pay for road infrastructure or water infrastructure. And from time to time, we've been successful on those, but we're always subject to the specific parameters of the program. And if we get these dollars, there's also no way for us to allocate or request allocation from a recreation to a different stream either. So that's the long and short of it. It's the senior levels of government that dictate where the program monies come from. And it's up to us to determine whether or not we should go for them. And it's certainly our recommendation here that we do on this one.
Thank you. It's good. Yep. Any other questions? Mayor Boot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a relatively quick question. First of all, I'm really excited to see that there is this opportunity to apply for $6 million for this project. My question is, if we are successful in getting the funding, but the project doesn't pass through the referendum, then what happens?
CAO?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And back through the chair to Mayor Boot. What we would do is turn those dollars back to the province and or through the UVCM program, as that our request for them would be on a very specific basis, subject to those application requirements. And when projects can't be completed in those sorts of circumstances, they'll go back to their original list that they use to score projects and fund other projects. So once we receive those funds, they are dedicated to this particular project. And if ours doesn't go forward, then we turn those funds back.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, a follow-up?
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to try that again, Mayor Boo? We can't quite hear you.
Maybe I'm going into a spot where it's difficult to hear. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, it's good
Chair?
now. Yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. I just wanted to thank the CAO for that. And that kind of adds on to what the question that Councillor Van Alphen was just asking, just making it clear that if this is a specific, there's specific criteria for these kinds of things. And if we get it, that's fantastic, provided the referendum shows that this is what the community wants. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there a time limit on, so if we are successful in getting it, we have to spend that money by a certain time?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There is, the time limit, I believe, I'm just looking for it here, is 2026. If I'm remembering that correctly, looking at Lori here. There is a time limit where it has to be spent by. Maybe it's not in this document, but what my memory is telling me is 2026. We'll dig into that and get a better update, send it out to council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you. If we're successful for this grant funding and the referendum didn't go through, would it be like the solar project where we'd ask for a scope change and possibly use the $6 million for renovation?
Through the chair, it's a great question. So we can always make that request. Absolutely. Like I think in that scenario you're outlining, we would probably try to do that. In all likelihood, so it wouldn't prevent us from trying, but on all likelihood, it'd be very low probability. In fact, we've already had some exploratory conversations with the funder in that regard. It's a very competitive pool. Their parameters are quite defined. If we did go forward to request some or all that money for renovation instead, there's a very defined process that ultimately in this case would be a major scope change. It goes to a formal committee involving all levels of government and other parties, and they would advise a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that. But as I say, initial discussions on this particular one are that would be a major scope change and something that likely would not be supported.
Thank you. Are there other funding opportunities we're looking at for this project, or is this kind of the big one?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to our director, I'll get Lori to say a few words about this, but this is the big one right now. These come down quite often, and we may see more coming through. But for right now, this is the one that really seems to meet our parameters. We have been searching. A lot of the other programs are more dedicated to particularly greening infrastructure to reduce GHG emissions and that sort of thing on a net project basis, which this wouldn't do because we're also building a larger facility. So even though it's more efficient, you probably would have the same or greater GHGs. But we're keeping our eyes peeled, and we'll definitely be coming back to council if there's anything further. Was there any other ones that we were chasing down right now, Lori? Not at this time. Yeah, this is the one we're really have our fingers crossed on.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other questions, if someone wants to bring forward a resolution. Councillor Van Elfen. Probably should, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the application for the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund delivered through the Canada Community Building Fund in British Columbia is supported to obtain $6 million funding towards the Summerland Recreation Center project, and that the District of Summerland will provide overall grant management for the project.
Okay, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Barkwell. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Moving on to 7.4, Seniors Week, free transit, and I'll turn this over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair Holmes. So BC Transit has approached the district to gauge interest in providing free transit services to seniors, those 55 plus, during Seniors Week, which is June 5th to 11th, 2022. Promoting transit during the week supports the Summerland Age-Friendly Assessment and Action Planning Project, in which it was identified that there was a significant lack of awareness about public transit and the barriers that those with financial mobility restrictions experience. Free transit will enable increased access for individuals to participate in events planned during the week. BC Transit has estimated that foregone revenue would be approximately $80 to provide free transit services to seniors during that time period. So before council is the staff recommendation that staff be instructed to provide the service free to seniors for the week of June 5th to 11th. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Is transit free for people under 12 in Summerland? It is. I know BC Transit is. I'm just wondering if it is in Summerland. And if it is, whether we can encourage grandparents to take their kids on the bus.
Corporate officer.
Just give me 1 second. Let me find that out.
If it's not, perhaps we can also make kids under 12 free for the week just to see how that goes. Would be why I'm putting it out there. I think it's there's some value to that.
While you're looking at, we'll hear from Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would we be getting a list at the end to see how many riders took advantage of this program?
I'll turn that over to the corporate officer as well.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Van Elfen, we could ask BC Transit for that, for sure.
I have some objection to characterizing people 55 years old as a senior, but
Through the chair to answer Councillor Carlson's question, children 12 and under are free.
So I
Councillor
wonder
Carlson.
if we go ahead and do this, can we message to remind people that children under 12 can ride free? I think that'd be very valuable.
We
Thank
can
you.
do that for sure.
Okay. Someone want to bring that resolution forward? Councillor Carlson?
I'll move that staff, the council instructs staff to provide free conventional and handy dart transit for seniors 55 plus during Seniors Week of June 5th to 11th, 2022.
And second, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. We'll take a short break now, 5 minutes, does that work? Yeah, so 2:25. Okay, thanks. we're good to go? Yep. Okay. You have an item of clarity? Should we,
Yeah, if I can.
before we proceed with 7.6?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Item of clarity, CAO.
Yes, thank you to council. I spoke too soon on I looked at the detailed program criteria after I answered to council about the recreation grant. So it's certainly our recommendation that given where we're at trying to fund the recreation center, that we're in the best place possible right now to make that application for the 6 million to apply for the rec center. However, in the detailed program criteria, roads projects are allowed. They're quite restricted in terms of where you have to be in order to apply for them. And we, for that reason, are focusing our main effort on the recreation center as being what we believe the highest probability for success. But it is an element of the program that does allow for, we could apply for a local road project as well. Based on our previous experience under these programs and getting actually funded for those projects, we have not had good success. And so we're thinking that our best and strongest suit right now is the recreation center if we actually want to see funding under this program. But I just wanted to clarify that with council because I misstepped in my answer on that when asked by Councillor Van Elfen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any questions? No? Okay. We'll carry on the agenda then. 7.6, electrification of power tools and equipment. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. So we're just waiting for the Sustainability and Alternative Energy Coordinator. If I could ask Council, maybe we could do item 7.9 quickly. I don't anticipate that one to take longer than a few minutes.
Okay, Council's okay with that? Yeah, okay, 7.9, Action Fest Corporate Officer.
Great, thank you, Chair Holmes. So the Action Fest Festival is scheduled to be held in Memorial Park from June 3rd to June 5th, 2022. The event organizers have applied to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for a special events permit to provide a beverage garden at the event. The Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch requires applicants of a special events permit to obtain written permission from the local governing authority for the special events permit if the event is planned to be held on land or premises owned by municipal government. As part of the application for the permit, the event organizer is required to submit a site plan and security plan. The area that liquor will be served must be surrounded by a barrier that will limit the sale, service, and consumption of liquor to that area. The event organizers have stated that security will be provided pursuant to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch regulations, and that 2 security guards will be located at the entrance to check the identification, and that security guards will be patrolling the gardens throughout the duration of the event. The beverage garden will be open and providing service for the following times: Friday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. So before council is a resolution to support Action Fest application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Van Elfen?
Put the recommendation forward, Mr. Chair.
Okay, second. Councillor Trainer, any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's, yeah, okay, that's a thumbs up. I presume that's in favor. So that's carried. And now we're moving to, are we ready for 7.6?
Little off topic here, but I do believe I watched her run up the stairs. We could quickly do 8.1. That is just the adoption of the election and assent voting amendment bylaw.
Okay, moved by Councillor Carlson, second. This is for adoption of the election and assent voting amendment bylaw. Second by Councillor Barkwell. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Should we? All right. Oh, Odessa. Okay, 7.6, electrification of power tools and equipment. I thought our CO was going to introduce this.
Yes, did you want to
Yeah.
introduce that?
I will.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I was just going as slowly as possible. Let Odessa get her computer set up there. So in February, staff were reporting on the status of electric vehicles on the capital list. Upon receiving the update, comments were made that it would be good to see electrification beyond district vehicles, including equipment and tools used in district departments. We did not have that information on hand at the time, but we committed to looking into it, coming back to council for awareness on progress in this regard. Today, we have our sustainability and alternative energy coordinator with us to provide an overview on the report and to take any questions of council. So with that, I'll turn it over to Odessa.
Thank you, and I apologize for my tardiness there. I was keeping an eye on things and then got ahead of me. So thank you so much for the introduction. So yes, I have a report here today for council's consideration and for information with regards to power tools and equipment. Based off a request earlier in the year, I conducted an analysis with different departments through Public Works, including water, electric, wastewater, and just the general utilities and works departments there. So in total, there were 94 items that were cataloged, and through those, 42 were currently battery powered or electric, with 5 items slated for replacement with battery or electric options, and 8 items could have been replaced with battery or electric. The remaining pieces were identified as needing to be remained as gas. However, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a high-level overview as to what is currently between the departments to understand what strategies and procurement processes are in place and what has been converted to date. So with that in mind, with the items that we do have, staff also looked into the procurement policy as a way to understand how the procurement is moving forward for future purchases. In this case, a lot of these items are very small, but for larger pieces such as lawnmowers or seated lawnmowers that require a higher level of procurement, there is a policy section in the policy document that does recognize environmental and environmental stewardship consideration. So staff are required to follow this, and that's section 4.11, which is sustainability and social procurement. And that's in the policy 200.6. So there are checks and balances in place to ensure that items that we do purchase have consideration for environmental sustainability, as well as economic sustainability and social sustainability. And that should be used at any time. At this point, it is just, this has just been an investigative process, so there are no recommendations per se from staff moving forward that would require any purchasing or changes to current policy or bylaws. However, staff would say that there is a recommendation to inform and continue to inform staff about that policy, that they are continuously aware that it does exist, that there is a section in there that does proclaim there is a need for environmental considerations when purchasing. As well as to consider the larger and broader actions and goals that council does currently have from a high level, that we do want to ensure the reduction in emissions and increased energy efficiency for the district operations is considered as larger purchases or other purchases are considered. To conclude it, while there are some items that need to remain gas just for emergency backup, as we do consider as well for vehicles where we need emergency combustion vehicles, we also need to look at what we currently have and how long the lifespan of the equipment is. It's one thing to replace things that need it, whether they're end of life or broken, but another to just replace them because there's an electric option. We still want to make sure that the sustainability component of using things to their end of life is also considered. That in itself is just a good process for any equipment that we do have. With that being said, the motion that is on the table here is that this report be taken as information by council and to consider just continuously informing staff to ensure that the procurement policy is in place and that it is made aware to other departments as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you. When it comes to like electric, like lawnmowers and what have you, and our procurement policies, do we still reach out to our local suppliers first? Or do we just throw it out into the World Wide Web, so to speak, and take the cheapest price from maybe Vanderhoof or Prince George or whoever knows where? Or do we give locals first crack at it?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Alphen. As far as I'm aware, there is no particular request in there that states that we need to go local first, but we do ask that as part of the selection process, we look at their social and environmental sustainability standards. So if they have fair labor practices or if they themselves practice good environmental stewardship, that is something to consider as well, but not specifically local.
Corporate officer.
Sorry, just to clarify on the procurement process. So if the specific procurement at hand triggers one of the trade agreements, local preference is actually not allowed to be given.
Mr. Stam, do you have something to add?
The short answer for small equipment, like what you described, we initially go local because it falls well within those limitations in our procurement policy and all the other ones.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Don't see any. Would somebody like to bring this forward for information? Councillor Van Alphen, Councillor Trainer. I think I saw your hand. All in favor, any opposed? No, that's carried. Moving on to 7.7, Code of Conduct, and I'll turn this to our CIO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to our meeting on April 11th, where staff received some initiating direction for the content of a Code of Conduct for Council's use, we are back today with a draft. Kendra will speak to the key elements of the draft in a moment, and we will certainly take any further changes at the direction of Council. Of course, if there are no additional amendments or inclusions to the proposed Code of Conduct, Council may forge a resolution to adopt the document as presented today. And with that, I'll turn that over to Ken.
Thank you, CAO Stat. So before Council is the first draft Code of Conduct. Upon receiving direction from Council at the April 11th, 2022 regular Council meeting, staff have drafted the Code of Conduct to include the key principles of integrity, respect, accountability, and leadership and collaboration as identified by the Working Group for Responsible Conduct. As well, the additional principles of creativity and transparency as identified in Council's current published values have been included as part of the foundational principles of responsible conduct. The draft further includes a range of standards of conduct that reflect the foundational principles, like those in the City of Prince George's Code of Conduct. The clauses reflect general behaviors that are encouraged and discouraged and are written as general statements to be broadly applicable. Should Council wish, additional clauses or specific statements and examples of expected behavior can be included upon further direction. If there are no additional amendments or inclusions to the proposed Code of Conduct, Council may also pass a resolution to adopt the document as presented. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through our corporate officer. Is this something that possibly should be given out at election time? with potential new council members coming on board prior to an election, so they know what they're dealing with, especially like, you know, the section conflict of interest, so to speak, where to find this information. Thank you.
So through the chair to Councillor Van Elfen, if council chooses to adopt today or even on June 13th, we would for sure include it in our candidate info session on June 23rd. We haven't yet drafted the nomination documents. We're in the process of doing so, but council members coming on would be well informed of this as it would apply to all new council members. And even under the current legislation, if it is adopted or the proposed legislation, it's waiting for the regulations to be adopted by the Lieutenant Governor. Council, the new council would have to either consider the new code of conduct and say, yes, we're going to move forward with this, or they have to consider whether they want one. And if they choose not to have one, they would have to come out with a public statement as to why. So new council members, even those just thinking of running, will be well informed of this.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. So would someone like to bring forward a motion? Councillor Carlson?
I would like to move that staff be provided direction on the proposed elements. That's the wrong one. Sorry,
If you want to, do you want to
I'm just wondering.
adopt?
Well,
as
that's what. Yeah,
presented?
sorry, that's what
So
I'm-
option
since
2.
we like it.
Yeah. Move
So
to
option
ado-
2. I'm
yeah.
going down further.
Move to adopt the code of conduct as presented.
I don't know why I don't see it, but that's exactly what I'd like to do. Thank
Okay.
you, Councillor Holmes.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Van Elfen? Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay. Moving on to 7.8, anti-racial discrimination, anti-racism policy, and corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Chair Holmes. So at the May 9th regular council meeting, council directed staff to draft an anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy. Staff have taken the model policy drafted by Lidstone & Company law firm and utilized the templated resource as a foundation for the proposed district anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy. The draft policy is intended to codify the District of Summerland's commitment to conducting the day-to-day operations and governance in an anti-discriminatory and anti-racist manner and environment. The implementation of this policy is a public commitment that the District of Summerland will continue to ensure that all who work and interact with the District of Summerland are able to do so in an environment and manner free of racism and racial discrimination. An estimated cost of $6,000 would be required for 2023 to provide training for staff and council on the policy, similar to the bullying and harassment training. Cost beyond basic implementation would be determined on specific incidents should they arise. An approximate cost for an investigation would range from $6,000 to $12,000. Before council is the staff recommendation to direct the Chief Administrative Officer to sign and adopt the policy as an administrative directive, as the policy focuses on the internal workings of the district as a corporation and primarily informs and/or impacts employees and contractors, similar to the bullying and harassment policy as well, and that the appropriate budget for training for both council and employees be allocated in the 2023 operational budget. Should council have any revisions, staff would be happy to accommodate them within the document, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Councillor Carlson?
I think it's great, and I appreciate the work staff's done. I guess my question is, we're having an anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy. Summerland doesn't have necessarily an inclusivity policy. I'm wondering if this might be something that grows to be more I'm not speaking about what was said earlier today. I'm thinking more like an LGBTQ community trying to, speaking of people who may also be considered minorities, but not racially just something to put out there. And I know, I just want to confirm we do not have one, but potentially there's a lot of, probably wouldn't be too much to create one from, instead of creating another one on top of this in the future. So that's just something I think we should be aware of, because I believe it's just as important in policy world as this one. Thank you.
I tend to agree. Discrimination and bigotry comes in many forms. So, Councillor Barkwell.
I'm kind of thinking about the code of conduct, and we were sort of presented with the different models. Some of a more, there was a sort of a small, medium, large version, a one pager, and a multi-page version. And we had some discussion and choice on what we thought was appropriate for our community. And I look at this, and it is the one prepared by a law firm in Vancouver, and certainly it is the probably most comprehensive policy you could possibly have, because I'm sure a lot of, but I wonder whether it is the appropriate one for us and whether we shouldn't be, looking at others as well. It was raised earlier about the environmental discrimination. Well, I know that's a thing. They can demonstrate that freeways were built through poorer Black communities rather than, other options. And so certainly it's a thing, but is it applicable to us? I don't know. How does the rest of the council, would anybody else sort of interested in looking at other models, other options before we adopt sort of the one presented?
Maybe staff can take a stab at that. I don't know if there are other models.
So through the chair to answer Councillor Barkwell, the models that I looked at from other communities, as it is kind of become a new, trend's not the right word, but it is a new policy that is being adopted quite across the board. I would say actually all the ones that I reviewed were adopted right from this template. That doesn't mean that other ones don't exist out there, and staff, if that is the direction of council, staff would be willing to do more research to find them and bring them back.
CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the other reason why we came back with the template, which was included on the last meeting as well, is because it does have the benefit of in-depth legal review from that company and usage through other communities. So it's tried and true. It is, they clearly erred on the side of inclusion in terms of the process, but it does outline all the necessary steps in case there's a challenge and how those are followed. And we would be therefore consistent in our approaches with other communities that have adopted it in that regard as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to Councillor Carlson's comments earlier. Where was that? Prohibited grounds of discrimination: race, color, ancestry, place of origin, political beliefs, religion, marital status, family status, physical or mental disabilities, sex or sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age of a person or class of persons. Does that not include the LGBTQ idea? I'm just asking, I'm sorry, if it's I just thought it sounds to me it's covered in here, but I could be wrong.
Just, it's an anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy, and so that doesn't mean it's a, there's a missing component there. If we wanted to go further, I think there's a potential to do that. And what I'm saying is that I don't, I think it can be when this gets, it can be the same policy but revised and improved, or it can be its own policy. But I think if there's a whole training session involved and there's budget associated with it, it makes sense that you would make it all part of one really important conversation. Thank you.
What's the difference between racial discrimination and racism? Mayor Boot?
Sorry, I forgot. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to follow up on what our CAO was stating. In response to the question about, I guess that came from Councillor Barkwell, about other policies and why we worked with this one. I think another thing that we as a council agreed to at our last meeting, or the last time this came forward, is that we directed staff to use this template, and that's exactly what staff did. Not saying that we can't change our minds, but it would be another reason why staff brought back this policy, because they were directed by council.
Corporate officer.
So thank you, Councillor Holmes. So to answer your question, the policy does provide definitions for racial discrimination and racism. It provides two separate. On the second to last page.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we want to go? Councillor Carlson.
I think we want to move a motion. So I'm going to, unless there's more questions.
Go ahead.
All right, so I'd like to move that the Chief Administrative Officer be directed to sign and adopt the attached anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy as an administrative directive, and further that staff allocate the appropriate budget for training of both council and employees in the 2023 operational budget.
Seconder, Councillor Trainer. Any discussion? Mayor Boot.
Sorry, I was just raising my hand to second. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. I think we're at the public media comment period. Anybody on the line? No, there's nobody in the gallery. So I'll need a resolution to close the meeting. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Oh.